The series opens in Sakagahara, where Shimazutoyo, he says, left alone with a couple of troops to make an opening for his uncle, the commander of the Shimazu troops, to escape. Treyaviza manages to mortally injure the enemy general, and likewise, he gets critically wounded, but a couple of arrows and stabs won't put the mad lad down as he proudly stands his ground and refuses to die, scaring the enemy army and forcing them to retreat. Due to Toyoviza's Giva Chad aura, anyways, walking from the battlefield wounded and bleeding, Toyoviza finds himself transported to a corridor of doors where a middle-aged man at a desk waits for him. So the monkey decides to do the only thing he knows, bonk a supreme being, which turns out to be very stupid after getting sucked into one of the doors and dropped into a field unconscious. Two elven children with no sense of stranger danger find Toyoviza and decide to bring him to Castle Ruins, the hideout for two of the drifters. Getting closer to the castle, another drifter, Yoichi, tells them to stop, and if they move, he will kill him. The elves explain that 12, he says, is also a drifter and that he is dying. Realizing that Toyoviza is a drifter, Yoichi tells them to leave him and leave what is going on. He explains that Tuyo, he says, likely from Japan and is injured. They decide to tend to his wounds and see if he will survive. After 12 years wakes up, he finds out that his wounds are stitched, but what surprised him the most was a crazy old man claiming to be the demon king of the six heavens, Oda Nobunaga. And as expected, Tuyoviza didn't believe that he is the real Nobunaga, as the OG was killed 18 years before Toyoviza's involvement in the Battle of Sakagahara. He also meets Yuichi, a saucy-looking archer who died almost 4 centuries ago. No banana, and Yuichi explained that before their supposed deaths, they ended up in a strange stone passage with multiple doors and a man sitting in front of him. Hearing that, Toyoviza states that he also met him while leaving Sakagahara. Outside of their hideout, a cute spy monitors the drifters. She gets contacted by a man via magical crystal ball to check on her status. The man with the sick fashion style belongs to an organization known as the Octoprist. The man declares his intentions to meet the drifters and then orders his men to get ready, preparing for the upcoming war with the Ents, an opposing force advocating for the destruction of the world. On the other side of the spectrum, two drifters, Hannibal and Scipio Africanus, are in the middle of a heated argument while a member from the Octopus organization observes them from afar. The observer gets ordered by the man in white, Abe, to bring the drifters to him in preparations for the war against the Ents. Meanwhile, the elven village located near 12V's group of drifters is attacked and set on fire by soldiers from the Order Empire for associating with the drifters. The Big Lucy, on their part, is the main man. He smells blood, thus sprinting to the village to rescue the elves, repaying his debt to the young elves for helping him earlier. At the village, a lone elf stands on lines of the elves and tells them they saved a drifter. He reminds them it's forbidden for them to enter the forest and associate with the drifters. Shara complains that they need to enter the forest to get firewood and to hunt, and as they took their women, he thinks they are basically telling them to die. Ram confirms they need to die, along with the other demi-humans like dwarves and hobbits, and then kills the village leader. They start killing elves with Aram explaining they are allowed to kill 50 of them. Aram then receives news that there is a fire in the wheat field. Toyoviza then charges and starts killing soldiers, joined by Nobunaga and Yuichi. They easily defeat the douchebags, but it's not enough. Enraged by the carnage and cruelty inflicted upon the elves by the Empire's soldiers, Toyoviza brutally beats the commander in charge of massacring the elves, with the sheath of his sword and starts hitting him over and over and over. It was so bad the dentist would be a millionaire after fixing his teeth. That would have been the case if Toyoviza didn't order the elves to kill him themselves. Back in the corridor of doors, the bespectacled man Murasaki is visited by his nemesis, a goth chick named Easy, who mocks his efforts to send drifters to the unknown world to combat her Ents, who had begun invading the southern regions of the world. Bringing us to the kingdom of Carniadas in the southern regions, Abe is worried that the Black King is coming, but the Carniadas warriors try to assure him they are fine as they have never managed to breach their wall. Looking at them, Abe realizes they won't even last 2 days and decides to go and see the situation with Kaftu in hopes that the two old drifters would lead the army and save the country. Abba and his subordinate try to convince the commanders of the defensive troops to let Scipio and Hannibal take charge of their army. However, The leaders refuse to give the two drifters command over their troops, not only because Hannibal looks like a guy who would eat a rat but also because the commanders want to stay in charge. A foolish decision resulted in Abe withdrawing the Octoberists and the drifters from the country as the Ents and their army consisting of dragons, goblins, and other non-human races begin their attack. The leader of the Ents, the Black King, sends Hijikata Tashiso, John Dark, and Anastasia Mikolayevna Romanova into the battlefield and questions Minamoto no Yoshitsune if his allegiance is with the drifters or the Ents. The Chad Yoshitsune vaguely states he will go with the side that interests him the most. As the Black King's army continues the attack, a door opens in the sky, and a World War II Japanese airplane comes out piloted by Kano Nashi. Now she wonders where he is and why there are people flying on dragons. Tushizo John Dark and Anastasia Sia easily break the walls and start killing soldiers. Seeing all the destruction of the city, now she is reminded of bombings in Japan and gets angry. Abba takes Scipio and Hannibal to Butch Cassidy and summons Kid. But before escaping, he asks if they will lead their army if they stand a chance against the Black King. Hannibal says the chances aren't zero, and Abba comments that if they unite with the samurais, then there is hope. As they escape, Butch and Sundance gun down all the enemies they see. They eventually face a dragon, but now she comes and shoots it with his plane and then proceeds to shoot down other dragons. Meanwhile, the female spy monitoring Toyo-Lisa's group is discovered by the main man and his companions. Despite all, Menu informs the drifters that they have been brought to the New World to fight against the Ents. Though the base trio quickly rejects the idea, Menu explains to Toyo-Hisa, Nobunaga, and Yuichi that their purpose as drifters is to save the world from being annihilated by the Ents. To accomplish this, she informs them that the Octoprists are tasked with gathering the drifters together and appealing to the kings and feudal lords of the various states and countries to give command over their armies to the drifters. However, the Demon King knows better, and he's certain that the lords wouldn't allow outsiders to take charge of their armies. Instead, Papa Nobunaga proposes that the drifters, led by Toyoviza, take over the Order Empire, scaring Old Man Gregorio. Rasputin reports to the Black King that they have completely overtaken Carneades. As he reports the casualties, the Black King tells him to bring him all the injured ones as he will save them since they are his brethren. He goes and starts healing the injuries and tells Rasputin to tell everyone that the northern wall had fallen and those that didn't believe it or fear the humans will now join their ranks. The Black King reveals he wanted to save the humans, but as they rejected him, he will now save demi-humans and destroy the humans. He tells the Ents they need to go after the drifters and kill them as they are their only enemy. Back in the Elven village, Friovis's group offers to assist the elves with their fight against Corte to reclaim their state. Toyoiza and Nobenheimer fight over the leadership arrangements as Nobunoda wants the mad lad to leave, but Toyoviza doesn't want to. They get interrupted by the eldest son of the murdered village's chief, who pleads for their help. Toyoviza agrees to take the role of the commander and begins to set a trap for the Orto forces set to arrive in 3 days. Nobunaga asks Omanu to tell him about the elves, and she explains that decades ago, the humans attacked, defeated, and subjugated them. On the 3rd day, a force of 200 Orta troops marches into the village only to find it uninhabited. Camping outside of the village in the forest, the drifters and elves prepare to strike the Ortist soldiers at nightfall at the abandoned castle. Toyojiza says that they will kill everyone tonight before the ambush planned by the drifters. Nobunaga uses corpses in various human ways to create a saltier pit after Toyojiza buries the heads of the deceased as a sign of respect. Meanwhile, the trap begins to train the elves in archery and is surprised to learn that they have an innate aptitude for it. That said, might sinks in, and the Ordic troops notice that the village's water well got filled with Twitter. He's announced they will be attacking the village this night and then march towards the Lord's castle and kill him. No Banana is surprised, but Toyohiza tells him that he was told why there were no women in the village, as the elves reproduce only once a year. During that time, the women are taken by the Lord and his men. Nobunaga realizes this is an attempt to drive them to extinction. Toyofiza inspires the elves, and they attack the village while 3 of the elves launch their attack on the Ortist soldiers. Nobuno performs an enclosure to trap the Orta troops and continuously bombards them with wasteland arrows, resulting in wounds that can't clean. since the water is already filthy Twitter. Adhesive then moves between the whole army and kills the commander, making the rest of the army run in fear. The owl starts celebrating that they won, but Trio Visa tells them they still need to take the castle. Nobunaga realizes Toyohisa doesn't have a plan but tells him he has won and dresses everyone as the oldest soldiers. Elsewhere, escaping soldiers fall into traps, and the remaining are killed by Yoichi and his group. The Lord is informed of the troops' return, and they let them inside the castle. As the Lord comes, they reveal themselves, and Toyohisa asks for where the women are, and the Lord points at the tower. The Lord wonders about his soldiers, but Nobunaga tells him most are dead, and Yuichi is hunting the rest while heading towards the tower. Toyohisa tells them his disgrace to kill those that had given up the sword, but reaching the ruin with the women and seeing what they were doing with them, he gets angry and says he was wrong and is gonna kill them all. Nobunaga tells the elves to search the castle for all kinds of documents. Omanu comes and is surprised they managed to take the castle. Nobunaga points at a large portrait of Adolf Hitler and wonders who he is, and Omanu explains he is the father of Orte, the one that founded it. But they still don't know if he is drifters or ends. 60 years ago, he appeared and instigated people to rise against the government with his speeches. He caught the people's hearts and initiated a rebellion. After founding Orte, he ends his life. Nobunaga then gets informed that Twiliza dragged the soldiers out and plans to kill him. Nobunaga rushes to him, commenting on that given how beautiful the males were, it was obvious what they were doing to the females. He doesn't want Eliza to do that as it's his job. Before Toyohisa can give the order to kill them, Nobunaga hits him from behind and knocks him and then orders the elves to kill the soldiers. The elves shoot everyone except one man who kept telling them that he never touched the women and was just transferred there. Then the drifters return the women to their respective villages. Of the proclamation, which contains information about the heavy losses Orte is suffering from waging wars with numerous states, as a result, elven villages across the land begin to revolt and join the drifters. Saint Jeremy, a powerful aristocrat and former ally Hitler who owns a quarter of the Ord Empire, hears the news of how they are losing territory and realizes the country is done for. Saint Jeremy visits the leaders of Orte and informs them that their naval fleet that carries supplies for their army in the west has been destroyed. Saint Jeremy then comments about the elves, but the leaders don't take it seriously, making Saint Jeremy realize the country is indeed done for. Saint Jeremy then decides to leave and meet up with the elves and the drifters at nightfall. The chick with anger issues, Jeanne d'Arc, and her Simchild Rat, as well as several soldiers of the Black King's army, approach the drifters' hideout. They arrived shortly at the camp, and the assault begins after evacuating the elven women and children. Toyohisa confronts Joan, whom he mistakes for a man, while the pretty boy faces off against a big brick wall named Jill Jones. Starts burning everything, and old Manu comes and creates walls to protect Toyohisa. Haim takes her in retreat, thanking her for saving his life. As Omanu states she can create 2 more walls. Tori Visa asks her to do as he says and then escape into the forest. Joan burns the forest trying to find Toyohisa, but he appears behind her. She cuts his left and right path, telling him he won't escape. But Toyohisa tells her he doesn't plan to. Omanu creates a wall behind him, and he steps on it, biting his sword. Omanu then creates a second wall on the first wall and launches Toyohisa straight ahead towards Joan, kicking her and sending her straight into a well. Toyohisa realizes Joan is a woman and tells her to leave and act as a woman, but she gets angry and explains she fought for France. But he knocks her, commenting he doesn't know France. Meanwhile, the dude who looks like a chick is struggling in his battle against Jill due to the latter's inhuman strength and durability. Thankfully, before Yuichi is nearly killed, Butch and the Sundance Kid arrive at the scene using a Gatling gun to destroy Jill's body and save Yuichi. However, Jill is still standing with fire in his heart that got extinguished when he saw his tomboy queen Joan being rescued by the Dragon Riders. Thus, he dies with a smile and promises to wait for Joan to join her in the afterlife as he disintegrates into salt. After reuniting, Omanu Abba introduces himself to the drifters as the leader of the Octopus organization. Ava tells Nobunaga the reason they were brought to the New World, and that is to help fight the Ends. Tori Visa returns and informs the group that he knocked John unconscious in a nearby well, So base gender equality advocate Abe scolds Toyohisa for allowing Joan to escape due to her gender. But Toyohisa doesn't care as he is determined to uphold his principles and not become Murasaki's pawn. The next day comes, and we see the Roman tactician Scipio, who was separated from Abe's group during the ride to rendezvous with Toyohisa's group. Encounters Naoshi, who has been appointed the sky god to a tribe of anthropomorphic dogs. Back at the Drifters' camp, which in Summer's Kid explained the mechanics behind their firearms to Nobunaga, who becomes ecstatic at the notion of producing more modern firearms at Magfall. Toyohisa leads his group to free the dwarves from Orta Ven while Abe, Butch, and Summer's Kid leave to search for Scipio and continue their investigation on the Ents. While Count Saint Jeremy and his aides journey to the Elven village to meet with the Drifters, Toyohisa's group attacked the Order Empire's largest armory in Gadoka to save the dwarves. Nominee Eva, having made the black powder, had created bombs and starts an attack on the Dulka. As the elves throw bombs, the soldiers start to panic, seeing all the explosions. The castle gates open, and fully armored troops come. Toyohisa tells the elves to run. Omanu then surrounds them with stone walls, and Toyohisa tells the elves to throw the bombs inside, obliterating their heavy infantry. They close the gates, and Nobunaga wonders how they would enter. He then wonders why they took Hannibal with them, but Hannibal makes Stare's signal with his arms. The one-eyed tactician Hannibal gives the one-eyed demon Lord Nobunaga the idea to use Yoichi's arrows and Omanu's stone wall spells to cast a staircase alongside the gate, enabling Toyohisa's group to invade the town and free the dwarves. Seeing how skinny they are, Toyohisa orders meals to be prepared for them instead of taking down the castle defenders. Toyohisa goes to the soldiers and tells them that the dwarves are eating right now, and if they drop their weapons, they will be allowed to leave. Otherwise, when the dwarves are done, they will kill them. The soldiers decide to give up, and as they open the gates, Toyohisa tells them their commander and he said in his life. But as he refuses, he cuts his head, telling him he isn't fit for a lord. When Yoichi prepares to pursue the fleeing troops, Toyohisa stops him and tells him that he does not have to follow dishonorable ways anymore, since this is their war, putting a tear in our little boy's eye. Meanwhile, a member of the Octoberist organization and his partner dog spy on the Ents at Carneades. They are horrified to learn that the Black King taught primitive agriculture to the monsters that will someday replace the humans once the Ents have eliminated mankind. The Black King attempts to recruit one of the 6 great dragons, the Bronze Dragon, into joining his army but is met with contempt and refusal by the latter for subjugating his dragon brethren as pets in his army. Using his ability to replicate the cells of any life form, the Black King gave him the Deadpool treatment and infected the Bronze Dragon with a cancerous growth on his body to gain his compliance. Afterward, Rasputin presents the completion of a simple alphabet in a syncretic religion for the demi-humans to learn to help establish a unified multiracial community as per the Black King's wishes. Meanwhile, Joan awakens from her coma after her fight with Toyohisa and is informed by Anastasia that her simp is dead. Enraged, Joan vows to avenge her fallen comrade by killing Toyohisa. To which Anastasia scolds her for her recklessness before promising to let her do as she pleases when the time comes. Back in Vidolka, Nobunaga requests that the dwarves begin forging muskets for their army to use in future battles. The next day, Count Saint Jeremy and his fellow queens arrive in Gabdolka to meet with the Drifters, sending his aides to test Toyohisa to see if they are worthy to ally with. Saint Jeremy reveals that he is a drifter and that he wants to sell the Order Empire to the Drifters before Orte is destroyed by other warring countries. To accomplish this, Saint Jeremy recommends that the Drifters overthrow the Order Empire and seize their territory. Earlier, Saint Jeremy asks the Drifters about their names. He recognizes Toyohisa from the Battle of Sekigahara, Yoichi from the Genpei War, and comments that he is famous. And then tells Nobunaga he is super famous. Nobunaga realizes that Saint Jeremy came from a later time than them, and Saint Jeremy asks Toyohisa if he wants to know what happened. But Toyohisa tells him he already knows. Arriving at Orte capital Verlina, a soldier stops Saint Jeremy's carriage asking who he is. But Alesta explains and threatens him to send him to the front line for stopping Saint Jeremy's carriage. Having called the Orta leaders, Saint Jeremy informs them that they are shutting down Orta. He had allowed them to rule the country 50 years ago, but now he is taking it back and will start a new life with Toyohisa as leader. Most of them agree with Saint Jeremy, but two of them disagree, revealing to be controlled by Rasputin. Having entered the capital with Saint Jeremy's carriage, Toyohisa and the rest arrive at the meeting where Rasputin reveals that the Black King is also planning to seize the Order Empire for his campaign. As the soldiers enter the room, Toyohisa quickly cuts them down. Rasputin realizes this is the leader, Toyohisa, but as he attempts to talk to him, Toyohisa completely ignores him and starts beating his puppet. After being humiliated by Toyohisa, Nobunaga, Rasputin retreats. He explains the situation to Tashiso, who tells him to leave everything to him, and he will take Orta. The Black King tells them that if they think Orta isn't obtainable, they can change their plan and crush it by causing maximum destruction and chaos. And Saint Jeremy then starts to argue, as Saint Jeremy said he only brought 500 soldiers, as it was intended for a normal coup and not a war. Staring them all muscular but topless and holding hands, Saint Jeremy explains they are his sacred band of thieves. They give Saint Jeremy's men muskets, and Toyohisa explains that Nobunaga will leave them while he leads the dwarves and Yoichi the elves. Nobunaga guesses that the enemy had probably changed their plan and will now kill and destroy anything they see. As the battle starts, Nobunaga orders his men to shoot, making the enemy experience firearms for the first time. As they gun down the front line, the rest realize they can't just go ahead anymore. Toyohisa then charges with his men. Tashiso is seen elsewhere, looking at the battle and how the soldiers are being killed. He gets angry. Toyohisa and the dwarves push forward and slaughter the enemy troops. Nobunaga orders his men to keep firing and break their rear. Tashiso tells the infantry to pull back, and rear guards to spread out and split into smaller groups. Yoichi observes this and informs Nobunaga that they are burning the houses and obscuring their vision. Nobunaga then guesses that the enemy leader knows about firearms as they are adapting too fast. Tashiso finds Toyohisa and introduces himself as Hijikata Tashiso from the Shinsengumi, commenting that he will never forget the Shimazu clan. Toyohisa Visa realizes he is from a different era than him and wonders what his descendants had done to him. Tashiso gets angry and releases his power. Nobunaga wonders what they must do, and Hannibal comes and tells him they need to do berry smashing and throws some berries and starts smashing them, explaining they taste better if he smashes them all together. Nobunaga then calls Yoichi and asks him if the enemy is randomly setting up the fires. As Yoichi observes, he realizes they are moving in a pattern that heads towards the Capitol building. And Nobunaga realizes they still haven't given up on taking the country. Tashiso uses his power, creating smoke with ghostly images of dead Shinsengumi to attack Toyohisa. Our boy then jumps into a building and comes out from a different window, closing the distance to Tashiso. But as Tashiso steps back and is about to use his power again, Toyohisa jumps into another window, and as he comes out, he throws plates at Tashiso, which angers him even more for not fighting like a warrior. But Toyohisa explains that this is a war, and he is not supposed to fight like a warrior. His only goal is to cut off the enemy's head. Tashiso engages him and manages to break his katana and then attacks him with his power, inflicting several cuts on him. He tells Toyohisa that he underestimated him, but Toyohisa says that he never underestimated him. Meanwhile, Nobunaga calls for everyone to gather and forms a plan. They let the enemy enter the Capitol building and then set it on fire and close the doors with Omanu's magic, not letting them out and killing anyone who attempts. Seeing that, Toyohisa explains that Yoichi and Nobunaga consider him as a leader, but he never thought of himself like that. But he knew that if he buys enough time, Nobunaga will figure something out and turn the tide. The dwarves then get behind Toyohisa, and he orders them to fire. In doing so, some of the shards hit Toyohisa, but they managed to disperse Tashiso's smoke, making him realize that Toyohisa is the biggest fool he's ever seen. Toyohisa then jumps and attacks Tashiso in a fistfight, with her army destroyed. The Black King orders Hijikata, who was getting his ass clapped, to withdraw from his fight against Nobunaga. Back in Carneades, Rasputin apologizes to the Black King for their failure in seizing Orte. Though the Black King is pleased that they were able to fuck the capital city and gauge the drifter's strength. And the show ends on a cliffhanger with Akachi, who, after hearing Nobunaga's voice, realizes why they weren't able to find his remains and decides to join the Black King so that he can kill Nobunaga. The end.